Hi, today I'm going to give a tutorial on how to post a fic on AO3. So we're going to start on our home page. You do have to be logged in for this, and if you are in the top right, you will see post, where we're going to click new work. Now you are on the post new work page, and I'm just going to go from the top to the bottom and explain what each thing is. So first of all, we are going to select a rating for our fic. This is one of the red categories. You can see here and here as well. These are ones where you have to choose something. You cannot leave this blank. Now for the rating, you can choose between not rated, general audiences, teen and up audiences, mature and explicit. If you're unsure what to pick, if you can click this question mark and AO3 will explain exactly what each thing does. If you choose not rated, your fic will not show up in searches for example, general audiences. And AO3 will generally treat it as if it is explicit, so it will also give a warning when people click it to say that, hey, this fic might contain explicit content. But if you are like, hey, I don't really want to pick a rating, or I'm not sure, or I just don't believe in the concept of ratings, you can choose to select not rated. Next, we're going to archive warnings. Here you must select something. If you do not want to give away what your fic contains, you can select choose not to use archive warnings. You can choose this, for example, if your fic does have major character death, but you think it is a spoiler for your story and you don't want to give it away, you can select choose not to use, and then people, by seeing that, will know, hey, this fic might contain any of these things, but the author is not going to say what it is. If you want to be accommodating, you can offer for people to leave a comment if they're unsure, and then you will tell them in the comments, but you don't have to. However, you have to be accurate with what you select here. So if you say no archive warnings apply, and it turns out that your fic does contain any of these other things that you should have warned for, because these are mandatory warnings, someone might report your fic to AO3 and they will give you they will send you an email to change the warnings on your fic to accurately reflect what is in the story. So if you do not want to warn, click choose not to warn, and don't click no archive warnings apply. You can also select multiple of these. So you can also say, for example, my fic contains graphic depictions of violence and I choose not to warn, which can also mean, for example, hey, I do want to warn for the violence, but one of these other things might be a spoiler. You can choose any combination of these. Next is the fandom. Now, for this fictional fic we're going to do, let's do supernatural. I don't actually have something to post. You type supernatural and then AO3 will give suggestions of existing tags that they think you might want to use. It is important that you use these existing tags because that is what enables people to find your story by using the tags and the filter system on AO3. Now, what happens is you can also just type supernatural and type enter. And then it will just add supernatural like that. And what happens is AO3 doesn't know which of the supernaturals you mean. So it will not show up if people search for Supernatural TV 2005. So you really do want to use these existing tags. Next, we have the categories. This is for signifying romantic or sexual relationships in your story. If you're unsure what each means, there's once again explanations. And one thing I do want to note here is Gen. Gen in the categories is different from a general audience's rating. General audience's rating means basically the fic is PG-13, it is appropriate for everyone, children could read it, and there won't be anything offensive in it. Gen just means there is no romantic or platonic or sexual, it means there is no romantic or sexual relationship in your story. So it could still be a mature or even explicit fic, but there is no relationship in it. Then we come to relationships. So for this made up supernatural fic. Let's say we have Dean and Castiel. I'm just going to type Dean Cass, and then AO3 will give me suggestions. Now you see we have several Dean and Cass tags. We have Castiel/Dean, and we have Castiel and Dean. The and tags are platonic tags. So if I chose this, it would mean it is a fic about the platonic friendship between Dean and Castiel. Whereas if I choose the / tag, it means a romantic or sexual relationship. You can choose to use both if you're unsure, if you think your fic contains both. But do also keep in mind that with every tag that you're going to use, try to think, hey, what is the person who is searching for this tag or trying to exclude this tag looking for? So for example, if you choose Castiel and Dean, but your fic is very romantic or sexual, it might actually be that the people who are looking specifically for this platonic tag are not looking for that. So then it would be better to choose the / tag instead of, for example, using both. Same kind of goes for example, background ships. So say you have another character and another character in the background, but they're not actually in the fic, it's just Dean and Castiel mention them. You can actually tag them in the additional tags instead of the relationships. And you can say background. Let's say you can, for example, do background relationships. You can also do background with a specific character or ship. And what that does is it doesn't show up in that relationship tag. So if this isn't supernatural, but if someone looks for this ship, this fic will not show up because it's not tagged as a relationship. So this is a polite way to make sure that background ships, people who are looking for background ships in your fic, don't see your fic because this is not what they're looking for. So it's polite to tag background things in the additional tags for ships and characters. But Castiel and Dean are the main characters in this fic that we've made up, so I'm going to add them. And then also here is the same thing as the fandom. You don't just want to type Castiel and then press enter, because there's a lot of different Castiels. There's even Castiel in Lucifer and Castiel in Supernatural. And in My Candy Love, I don't know what that fandom is, but there's different types, there are different Castiel characters, so choose the one that you mean. Because if you just type Castiel and press enter, it is not going to show up when someone searches for Castiel Supernatural. And then Dean also appears in this one, but he might not. It could be a fic that features this relationship, but it's just one of the characters thinking about the relationship, and then you only have to tag the character, or you only need to tag that character. You don't have to tag anything here. Then we're going to go for additional tags. Here, generally, I recommend just adding the tropes and also any warnings that you have that are not actually archive warnings. So, for example, you might say fluff, but you could also warn, like, say someone cuts their finger, so you can say blood, and that would be a warning, or blood and injury. You can also say mild injury, for example. Mild injury, that's not there. Well, then we're going to make it one. It could be that a tag that you want to use doesn't exist yet, then you just type it all nice and press enter and it will be added. And for example, this mild injury tag would be a nice warning for people who don't want to read a fic with mild injuries, or just to be informed of what is in the story. So yeah, we're gonna use that. And I recommend just adding as many as you think are appropriate. Also keeping in mind people who might want to read your fic, what are they looking for? So if your fic contains like 1 second of them seeing a cat on the street, maybe don't tag it with cats, because people who are looking for cat fics really want to read a fic that has cats as main characters or as important parts of the story. What you can also do here is what we sometimes call Tumblr style tags, which is just kind of talking to your readers. So for example, what you could say is Dean and Cass are stupidly in love with each other, for example. That isn't going to be filtered on. AO3 is just going to treat that as an additional tag that can't be searched on. But it can be a fun way to kind of show your readers what's going on, or just say something funny. And you can also just say like, author was sleep deprived while writing this, for example. Or this is my first fic, I hope you like it. You can just put whatever you want here. Do keep in mind you can only have a maximum of 75 tags in this entire thing. And you will probably not get there, but also people might get a little annoyed if you have a wall of tags for a really short fic. So try to keep it to the main important things. Then we're going to go to a title. This is another mandatory thing. You need to type a title. And then you choose your pseudonym. This is for any pseudonyms you have on AO3. There are other usernames that you can post on that are nested under your main username. It selects your main username by default. But you can choose, for example, I have one for translated works. So if this was a translation of one of my works, I would probably post it under there. Then you can choose to add a co-creator. This is if you're writing together with a friend, for example, you can type their name. I'm just gonna type one of my friends' names. You can add them and they will get an invitation to be added as a co-creator to your story when you post it. They can refuse it, so they can say, hey, I didn't actually work on this. I don't want to be added as a creator. Keep in mind that co-authors can edit the fic, and they can also remove the fic from the archive, and they can delete comments. Basically, everything you can do on the fic, they can also do. So if you add someone as a co-creator, they could potentially delete the fic. Then a summary. You do not actually have to give a summary. Some people find summaries very difficult. So what you can also do is, if you have like a fun paragraph that really showcases what the fic is about, you can just put that paragraph here. Or a very easy go-to summary kind of way is to say, in which this happens and this happens. But also you can leave it blank, but I do recommend adding something because this is what readers are going to be looking at to decide if they want to read this. Then next up, we have the notes. These are your author's notes. You can add them at the beginning and at the end. And in these boxes, this is plain text and you can add HTML. So for example, if you want to make something bold, you have to use this. Or if you want to make it italic, it's the same thing. And you can also use this to add links, for example. So if you want to add a hyperlink, you have to use HTML for that. If you're unsure how to do that, you can look that up somewhere. What is also a neat trick you can do is this has a rich text to HTML editor. So you can actually, in this, which is later where you're going to write your fic, you can actually use this to write your author's notes. And then you can, for example, do it here and have a link here. There, save. And then if you go to HTML, it will nicely have converted it for you. And you can copy and paste this into the notes box, just as a little hack. You can use this to easily make HTML when you're unsure how to, before you paste your work text in it. Something to keep in mind is these notes that you post when you post a story are going to go at the beginning of the work and at the end of the work, which also means that if you add additional chapters later on, these end notes will be moved to the last chapter. So if you post a second chapter, you might want to move these notes, go back and move these to the first chapter. You cannot do that when you first post, I believe. So that's something to keep in mind. Next we have associations. You can post your work to collections or challenges. This will generally not come up unless, for example, you write for a Big Bang event or a week. I organized a mini bang, for example, so I could say this is for the Todobaku mini bang. And then it will be added to that event. Some of these collections, they will have to accept your fic, so it isn't automatically added, but the moderator needs to accept it first. Generally, you can ignore this for most things. You can also gift the work. You can gift it to a user on AO3. For example, if I want to give this to my friend Octobot, I will just add them and then they will receive an email that they received a gift. For gifts, and I will just quickly go to my profile to show this as well. Here, when you go to someone's profile, you can see the gifts they have received. This is a public record of all the gifts that person has received. But someone can also reject gifts. There is a new setting on AO3 that is by default on for all existing users, but for new users, by default, they will not be able to receive gifts. And you can also disable receiving gifts for yourself. Next, we have this work is a remix, a translation, a podfic, or was inspired by another work. If you do this, you can paste a URL of another fic, and what that will do is if the story you are writing was inspired by something else. For example, if you're translating someone's work, you should paste their fic link here, and then at the bottom of your fic, if I have one real quick, I know I have one. Give me a second. Here, I have this fic, and someone wrote a fic that was inspired by it. And then at the start notes, you see the end of the work for more notes and other works inspired by this one. And here you can see there are actually two fics that were inspired by this. One is a podfic, and one is another remix that someone wrote that uses the same concept. And if you go to that fic, it will also say this is inspired by this fic. So this is basically a way to give credit if you post something that is inspired by someone else's work. In most cases, it's also polite to ask before you do this if they allow that. However, some people on their profile, they will have a statement if they allow transformative works. For example, I have that. Not everyone has that, so it is polite to, for example, leave a comment on their work to say, hey, can I translate this? Can I make a podfic? Can I write a sequel? And if they say yes, you can do so, and you can post using this feature. And this is also something that they will receive an invitation for. So if they say, hey, I don't want this link to my fic, it will not be linked. So yeah. Next, this work is part of a series. If you do this, I'll once again to go to my profile to show, it will show up as a series which links the fics together as like part 1 and part 2. You can choose an existing series if you have one, or not. You can just type the title of a series and it will create one. This could be handy to do if you already know you're going to post a sequel, because then people will see, hey, there's only one in it, but they can subscribe to it to receive updates later. And then lastly, if this work has multiple chapters, this will then be chapter 1 of, you can do question mark if you're unsure how many chapters your fic will have in total, or if you already know it will have 5 chapters, you can say it is 1 of 5. And then you can also select a chapter title or not. If you just leave it blank, it will just say chapter 1. Lastly, you can set a different publication date. You can do this, for example, if you wrote this fic before on another website and you want to post it here, but you do want to post it on the date you originally wrote it, you can set that publication date. One thing to keep in mind is generally when people search for tags, by default, it will show newest works at the top. So if you set this to, for say, a couple years ago, if I set this, hey, this is actually posted in 2013, this will show up as if it is posted in 2013, and it will not show up at the top of search results. So what you could do is post it for now first, and then later on say, hey, like half a year after you've posted it, I'm actually going to backdate it to when I originally wrote it, because then people will at least see that you posted it. And as very last, you have to choose a language. This is mandatory. I'm just going to choose English for this one. but don't forget to choose a language. If you do forget, when you click to post, it will remind you. And select a work skin. You can just skip this. There are several skins if you want specific formatting. Unless you know what you're doing, ignore this option because it can do a whole bunch of things wrong. And then as the second to last thing to the work, we have privacy. You can choose to only show your work to registered users, which means that if someone is not logged in on an AO3 account, they cannot see your work. You can choose to do this for whatever reason. It will give your fic slightly less visibility, but it could also prevent people who you don't want to see it from seeing it. And we have comment moderation. If you enable that, it means that when someone leaves a comment on your work, you get an email, and you have to approve the comment before it shows up on your work. And then you can choose who can comment on the work, whether it's registered users and guests. And guests means that someone can comment if they leave an email address. You will never be able to see their email address, but AO3 has it. You can also choose that only registered users can comment, or you can say nobody can comment. Alright, in the very last bit, we have the work text. By default, this will be set to HTML. If you are pasting from, for example, Google Docs or Word, you want to set it to rich text. So it will copy the formatting. So for example, I'm just going to copy this line. If I paste it, it will still have the bold. It will still have the bold here. It will copy the formatting. A couple of notes for formatting on AO3 is if you always press enter twice between lines like this, it will add a lot of space. So I'm just going to click preview to show you. There's now a lot of space between these lines because it treats the empty line as another paragraph. So I'm going to go back to edit here. So what you want to do is in your word processor, when you write your story, only tap enter once. And if you want the extra space, you can add space after a paragraph in your formatting. Another thing to keep in mind is AO3 is sometimes a bit finicky about italics. So I'm going to write example. And now you see I wrote example in italic, and then I have a comma after that. And now if we're going to preview that, you see this one time it didn't do it. Generally, AO3 will add a space after this. I think it's because I typed it in the box. But it will add extra spaces around italics. How you can prevent that is to make sure anything that touches an italic, make it also italic. So if you have a comma or a period or whatever after or before an italic, make sure that is also italic. Or quotation marks, for example, make sure they are also italic so it doesn't add extra spaces in between. One last thing that is nice in here is, for example, if you have dividers between your chapters or bits or scenes, you might do it like this. AO3 actually has this neat little horizontal line that you can add that then shows up nicely in the formatting like this. So you can replace whatever placeholder you have in your own document with these lines on AO3. One last tip that I want to give is if you want to embed an image. If you are embedding an image that is very large, larger than the screen, you want to set the width and height to a percentage. So for example, width and height both 50%. And because it is a percentage on, for example, on mobile, it will scale to the screen instead of being comically widened and the people have to scroll sideways to see it. So that is one tiny little trick for images. So yeah, that is the basics of formatting here. There is a lot more. If you have questions, feel free to comment on the YouTube video here, and I am happy to answer. But these are the very basic things, is make sure to keep the italics all together. Everything that touches an italic, make it also italic so it doesn't add extra spaces. You can add these dividers and don't add extra enters in your work because it will add a lot of extra space, and people don't really like that when they see your work. It takes up a lot of space. As the very last thing, you can choose to save your work as a draft instead of posting it immediately. Then it will be automatically deleted after a month. And then I think also when you go to post, it is somewhere you have your drafts. I'm not entirely sure where, because I generally don't use drafts here. Something to keep in mind is if you save a work as a draft, it will keep the posting dates of the day you made the draft. So when you post it, it will have been published on that date, and it will also not be at the top of search results. So I generally recommend to always post immediately. Other than that, we have the preview button, which I used a few times, where you can just check if everything looks all right. And then from there, you can choose to post, save as draft, edit, or cancel. And if you're all done, you can click post. And that is it. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful.